It has had a friendly relationship with Mike, and we intend to continue to have that friendly relationship as we go forward. Mike McCabe.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Raging Grannies for writing that song, paying homage to this book I wrote, Blue Jeans and High Places. Pretty sweet. I'm not going to talk about the book today. I'm going to talk about what this book needs to become. I didn't write the book to make money, that's for sure. I didn't write the book as an academic exercise. I'm no academic. I wrote the book as a blueprint. What I hope will be a blueprint. And blueprints, of course, are useless unless you use them to build something. And right after the Easter holiday, we will be publicly announcing that something that will be an outgrowth of this book. But what I really want to talk about today is what we all need to become. Not just what this book needs to become, but what we all need to become. Because if we are defined by what we hate rather than what we love, if we allow ourselves to be defined by what we're against rather than what we're for, we're not going to dig ourselves out of the rut that we're in. We're not going to escape the traps that we set for us. You're going to hear a lot today about what someone in Washington or someone in Madison is doing to destroy everything that we hold dear. Hell, you can look at the bumpers in the parking lot, and you'll see a lot of what we're against and what we hate. But we've got to talk about and act on what we love and what we're for. And I can come up with a dozen ideas, a dozen ways that we can change everything. And you can come up with a dozen more, just as good. But let me share with you my dozen, my 12 ways to get out of the rut that we're in and to change everything. And we've got to talk about these things, and we've got to work for these things, not just work against what we fear, but work for what we aspire to, what we dream about, what we wish for. Right at the top of my list, and this is in no particular order, but one thing that we need is local control instead of controlling the locals. We need to get back to home rule. If a community wants to act to protect its air and water and its landscape from sand mining, it ought to be able to do that. If a local community wants to publicly finance its elections, it ought to be able to do that. We need to get back to local control rather than controlling the locals. And one great example of this, one thing I would say when I advocate for local control, is the best darn thing that we could do for our schools is to keep state and national politicians as far away from them as possible. Second on my list, we've got to invest in success instead of paying for failure. That means more for schools and less for prisons. We are spending so much money paying for failure in society rather than investing in a path that leads people to success. We need to dramatically change one equation, and that's the fact that in our state budget, more is spent on prisons than on colleges. That equation has to change dramatically. Specifically, we need to talk about and work for universal free public education all the way through college. To create a pathway to the American dream for every member of our society. Third on my list is we need to talk about and work for every day one economy that works for all of us. A free market instead of the crony capitalism that we have today. And that means ending trickle-down economics and putting an end to corporate welfare and replacing that spending with investments in local entrepreneurs and homegrown small businesses. You promote economic growth by putting money in the pockets of consumers. You promote economic growth by stoking demand, not by giving handouts to the wealthiest few in our society in hopes that they will increase supply. Demand drives economic prosperity, not supply. We've fallen for decades for a sham that says that we can somehow feed the rich and expect some of that to trickle down to the rest of us. It has never been more than a trickle, and all it's really done is made the rich richer, the poor poorer, and slowly but surely exterminated the middle class. And we need to stop that. And we also have to come up with a whole new approach to worker rights and labor relations aimed at protecting and advancing all workers in every sector of our economy. For starters, we should replace the minimum wage with a true living wage. If you put in an honest day's work, you should not be poor. And that's something that we have to dedicate ourselves to. Fourth on my list is that we need corporations to be our servants, not our masters. We need corporate accountability and responsibility. We need consumer protection. We need worker rights. Andrew Jackson said, corporations have neither bodies to kick nor souls to damn. Well, we should stop treating them like people then. Number 5 for me is we need one-for-all taxation. One system of taxation that applies fairly and equally to everyone. Not 2 tax systems like we have today. One that's chock full of loopholes that were put there by lobbyists who work for the wealthy few in our society, and another that is an airtight system that applies to the rest of us. We need one tax system for all. We don't need any new taxes. We do not need any new taxes, but we sure as hell need to make sure that everyone pays the ones we've already got. Sixth on my list is civilized medicine. Health insurance and affordable medical care for everyone, no exceptions. And regardless of what you think of the Affordable Care Act, no, that does not cross this one off the list. We've still got much work to do. Number 7 is environmental sanity. We need to take global climate change seriously. We need to take the protection of our natural resources seriously. And that leads me to number 8. We need a declaration of independence from fossil fuels. And that means ending subsidies for fossil fuel production and replacing those subsidies with a national drive to make our country the world's leader in sustainable energy. Number 9, we need a digital REA. A modern-day equivalent of rural electrification that would bring high-speed internet access and cell phone signals to every nook and cranny of our country. We need to bring the digital world to every doorstep the way the Rural Electrification Administration brought electricity to every home and every barn in America.